Hello, CSFL. We're back again today with another CSFL podcast, and we're back with a bit of an ad hoc one today. As you can probably see on the screen, we've had a fantastic article produced by one of our general managers on the league, Zach of the Packers, talking about the season preview. As we all know, it's coming up pretty soon, and I thought it'd be a fantastic opportunity just to get Zach on and just talk about his views, because the work that he's put into this is just fantastic. And why not talk about season previews with someone who's done a huge amount of work to actually analyze it? So, Zach, I think it's great to have you on the show. Fantastic article.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I appreciate being on here and going through this. It's been interesting to. I put this together more than anything. This kind of gives me the chance to slow down and look at each team and kind of see where the teams are and kind of learn the rosters a bit better. That makes a league funner for me. So I'm already taking the time to do that. So I thought might as well put it into a nice little summary for everyone to look at.
Yeah, it's just incredible. I said to you before we came on, it's probably the best season preview I've seen in the sim league, just because of how easy it flows and how you've just given really good snapshots of every single team. And really thank you so much for doing this for the league. Really, I'm sure there's GMs on there who are likewise thinking this is just amazing. So looking forward to talking about it. Obviously, you've got the sort of the high level preview here of each division, which we'll go through in a little bit. But I just want to talk to you about the breakdown for each team, and if you want to just give us a bit of a summary of how you look at it and how you sort of bring that to draw your conclusions for each team.
Yes, for the you see at the bottom, you can see the player position grades. That's unfortunately I don't have the time to sit there and give every single position grade for every team a grade. So a lot of that's very overall rating driven. And then when I look at the offensive ranking and defensive rankings, I factor in last season performance into that number as well. Obviously, there's some GMs. Trying to think of Cleveland comes to mind. Some other ones. Some GMs seem to get the most out of their talent, so I take that into account when I look at last year's yards and stuff like that, and then I look at the position grades to get the projected record. But like I said, it's not an easy task, and it's heavily based on overall ratings for players, which isn't a perfect number to base it on, but it's from a data standpoint, it's kind of the quickest way to get to the end result.
Yeah, and I think what I really like about this is that you just give an overview of what happened last season, basically acquisitions, the high level grades, and then your projection, and then a couple of sentences on the summary. So it's a really good snapshot, and the amount of effort you put into this to give the GM at the end who's looking at this just a summary of what's going on is just fantastic. So really encourage pretty much every general manager who's in the league to go and have a look at this, because if you want a snapshot of what the league's doing and what teams are doing, it really does give you that. But we're not going to dive into probably every team, although we probably will as we go through the conversation here. But I thought it'd be quite good, Zach, just to talk about each division and then sort of build up with your prediction that you've got at the end and how you've come to that conclusion. So should we start at the top with the NFC West? And do you want to talk us through the teams there and your thought between the sort of the changes of wins from last season to this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good place to start. It was Arizona is really interesting. I mean, I kind of ran into this with a lot of teams, but it was really hard to give Arizona 11 wins because I think they're a really good team, and it was really hard to put them in second place. But the issue I was running into, there's so many good GMs in this league, so unfortunately I can't give everyone 10 plus wins. So someone had to give losses somewhere. I think San Francisco is going to be interesting this year. Obviously, they had a lot of cap space to work with, and they made the most of it. They got some pretty good acquisitions, and Matthews and Mangold, some other ones on defense. So I think it's pretty easy to see why they might be better this year. I think I don't know. Yeah. As between those two teams, though, I think it's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting division, and for the reasons you said, because obviously the Cardinals just completely stunned everyone last year. There's no denying that. Nobody expected them to get to the Super Bowl, and they just sort of became this fantastic sort of story through the playoffs last year. Had some tough decisions to make in terms of the offseason and players moving and cap situation and challenges. And then you've got on the other side of it the 49ers with their what was you summed up really nicely actually in the preview you've got here that the owner has finally stopped being cheap and let the GM finally spend some cap. And probably, yeah, they certainly have spent some cap and in some interesting areas. As you mentioned, brought in Ryan Matthews, Raji, James Laurinaitis, Nick Mangold. All these guys are really elite talent players. So you can certainly see the argument that they are going to be close to that Cardinals team. Just interested to get your thoughts probably on we know the Rams are a team that with a new GM, they've been down the bottom for a while, lacking a bit of talent, probably are in a bit of a rebuild. But I'm just interested in terms of Seattle Seahawks, who are 6-10, who I think last year had a bit of a slow start and then ramped up towards the end to end up with a 8-8 record. And you've got them dropping off 2 wins here, and just interested to get your thoughts as to why you feel they've lost those two wins that they would have got last year.
Yeah, I think that some of that comes back to their roster. Just kind of reevaluating it from kind of a blank standpoint. They didn't rank well when you look at their roster grades. You can see at cornerback they don't I don't think they have a single cornerback over 80 overall. Their defensive line's pretty weak too. So it'll be. I mean, they did pretty well defensively last year. So I could be missing the mark on that one a little bit, but that was kind of my red flags for them.
Yeah, I mean they're an interesting team. They have been ever since the CSFL started, in the sense that to begin with they had a great veteran GM who left. Then they had a couple of GMs, and now they've obviously got Casey who's come in, sort of steadied the ship a little bit. And a team we've always said on pretty much every pod I've done when we talked about Seattle, team that lacks proper elite talent, but as a combined team, they always seem to sort of overperform. So yeah, interesting your thoughts there. I guess in terms of the West, you obviously got the 49ers and the Cardinals pretty close to each other. So the 49ers having a bit of a massive jump in win differential, which we've talked about. Should we just finish off this division and probably do you want to just give a quick statement in terms of the Rams at 5-11? That's an additional win from last year, so there is progress there that you feel.
Yeah, I didn't spend a ton of time evaluating the Rams. They lost Jackson at running back, but I think it's just going to be. I'm not too sure what their GM situation last year was, but they were vacant for a while, weren't they? Or I could be wrong.
Yeah, so they went through a couple of GMs. Then they had a GM who turned up and was incredibly inactive for most of the season. So they were pretty much on autopilot for about a season. The new GM's come in and he looks like he's being pretty active. It's a tough GM gig, just because on one side of the ball they're pretty good, and on the other side of the ball they're not that good. That's my view. I think 5-11 is probably pretty fair if I was honest with them for that one. Okay, cool. So that's the NFC West. Should we move on to the NFC South? So interesting here. You've got quite a lot of win differentials changing this season.
Yeah, I really like the Panthers. When I looked at their roster, honestly, from a roster standpoint, I think they're right up there with the Saints. I couldn't put the Saints any lower than 13-3. They lost Breeze, but with their they're obviously going to be one of the most talented teams, I think, year in, year out, regardless of whether they lose a couple of players here and there or not. So, and their offensive line is really unbelievable. They're one of the best in the league. So I think they'll overcome any shortcomings they have at quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. I think with Rouse, you could probably give Rouse a terrible team, and he'd probably somehow find a way to make the wild card with them. He's a really good GM in draft day sports. So no denying the Saints, even without a quarterback really, a notable quarterback, are still going to be up there. I expect them to use that offensive line to its fullest potential. It is in my opinion, as you said, the best offensive line we've seen in the league, and I think probably the best one we've seen since we started the CSFL. So it's going to be interesting to watch. Moving on, I guess you talked about the Panthers, and you said they're talent-wise, they're probably up there with the Saints. But you haven't got them pegged in terms of the same number of wins.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just comes down to, the Saints GM has a little more, experience winning. So, but when you look at Carolina, they didn't do too well defensively last year. I know they were kind of focused on rebuilding. They ranked 24th in points allowed. But when you look at their defensive, grades going into the season from player roster standpoint, they look like they're going to be pretty top notch, especially in the secondary. So, a lot of their win growth over last year is based on getting better production out of their defense.
Yeah, and you've got them in terms of the report card. If anyone wants to go and have a look at that, you've got some big jumps for them. So just to give a sense, so in terms of offensive rank last year, in terms of points scored, points against, nothing else. Offensive rank was 11th last year. Offensive projection from you is 5th. And then the defensive rank was 24th last year, as you said. But you've got a massive jump there from 24th to 6th in the league. I'm guessing that's because they've added guys like Jaleel Brown, Julian Peterson in that back, in that defensive, in that defensive line that probably gives them the edge now.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of their growth, I think, is just based on. I really like their roster, so I'm kind of hinging that they figure it out from a coaching standpoint and put together a good season here.
Yeah, and obviously Cam Newton will be in his 3rd year, I believe. So another year of development from him. Yeah, I can certainly see that. And then I guess moving on, you've got the bottom 2 teams, which have the Atlanta Falcons, which we could talk about in a minute. But interested to get your view on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So you've got, again, with a massive win jump from winning only 2 games last year to winning 5 this year.
Yeah, I'm not real big on the Buccaneers. I think 2 wins. I think they can do a little better. Just I didn't really forecast anyone to do. I don't think I forecast anyone to go 1-14 or anything like that. So I tried to be a little more in the middle for some of the teams. So we'll see if they can improve a little bit. I had them project, I think, offensive 20th. I think they had some pretty weak at quarterback still, running back, but I think they had one of the better offensive lines. So we'll see if that helps them out.
Yeah, absolutely. They added Brandon Marshall this offseason, so one of the league's best wide receivers. So certainly can see that jump. And Luke, I can't say his name. Luke
Kuechly, yeah.
Kuechly, yeah. I can't say it. I always get it wrong. They added him in draft as well, which was a nice little pickup. Yeah. And then we don't necessarily need to talk about the Falcons, but just a team, they've just lost their GM. Still got Tom Brady and still got Calvin Johnson though. But it's probably, I imagine, you've got them here pretty much staying packed to where they were last year. Maybe a slight improvement in defense, but still meaning that they're going to remain at 4-12 this year.
Yeah, I actually like their roster. I thought their roster was pretty solid across the board. I mean, not great by any means, but it wasn't terrible. I think I kind of slotted them in at 4-12 more just due to their GM situation.
Yeah.
So if they get someone in, I think they could definitely, get close to 8-8.
Yeah, I think they're actually in a really good position for a new GM. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but they're obviously at the moment they're a bit cap constrained. But if you go into next off season, the majority of that roster comes off the books, and they do have. I think it's projected to have something like nearly 65 million or 60 odd million in salary cap to play with. So could be a quick turnaround, given that probably next year's free agency is going to be probably the last real deep free agency that we have going forward.
I'm guessing Calvin Johnson's coming off the books.
Yeah, Calvin Johnson's the big one that comes off the books, and there's a couple of other fairly sizable contracts that come off. But yeah, cool. So moving on to the NFC North, you've got this one pegged as probably Looks like a status quo from what I can see from last season.
Yeah, this one it's going to be interesting again. I don't see how. I mean, I think both teams are pretty even. I like your depth a lot more. I think we both have some really top end talent at a lot of positions, but I think you have a speed as far as depth, really up and down the roster. So that's why I gave you the lead in the win column. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And of
Yeah,
course, it's going to come down to our two games. So
yeah, it always does. It seems at the minute. But I did feel very sorry for you last year because of the silly playoff seeding bug that was in this current version. That was a bit really unfortunate for you because that obviously chucked you into a wild card position where you shouldn't have been. So um, we'll see how it comes down to this year. As you said, it's probably going to come down to our two games as it seems to always do. I mean, it's an interesting challenge, and I think it's one of the good things that I like about being the GM of the Lions is that there is definitely one strong competitor in our division. So it keeps pushing you to try and do better, really. Yeah. So perhaps if I give a view on the Packers and you can give a view on the Lions, and then we can cover the other two teams in the division. Happy for you to go first with the Lions, or I can dive in with the Packers, and because obviously I track you guys closely as in the off season and see how things are going.
yeah, that works. Yeah, honestly, I couldn't keep track of a lot of the moves you were making, so I couldn't even tell you what trades you made or. So I kind of just looking at it from a fresh point of view, though. I mean, I thought really up and down the roster. I mean, you can see from the position grades. It kind of tells the story by itself. But there's really no. I mean, if you're game planning to play you guys, there's no real weakness to attack. Not only that, but like I mentioned, the depth, the backup players, everything. I thought you had one of the deeper rosters in the league. So I don't really see any reason to forecast anything less than 12 wins. I mean, it could be even higher, but it'll be interesting. And then let me see. I know it looks like you made quite a bit of additions to your defensive line. So not that you need any help there, but
yeah, we did. So one of the things we never had is any good edge players or end players. So we made a conservative effort in free agency to go after a couple of them. And we were lucky that we managed to get Dockett, and then we managed to trade for Arakpo, which helps solidify that line a little bit more for us. Tried to get a couple of other offensive linemen, but the Saints managed to steal all of those. So well done, Rouse. But yeah, no, we made quite a few moves, mainly to try and utilize some of that cap, those draft picks that we had, to try and get us some elite players. So we'll see how that goes. I guess my view of the Packers is interesting. So you obviously lost Jennings and you lost Woodson, but I feel that whilst you've lost those two players, both elite players, I feel like the addition of Holmes, Matt Light, and Jimmy Smith are huge additions for you. I don't think you've necessarily lost anything from that. I mean, you could probably argue Woodson is the biggest loss rather than Jennings. So that'd be my view. I think the team is pretty much the same. I think Matt Light is going to be a huge addition for you, though, in the tackle position. Again, I don't think you have any real gaps. I know you've listed on your sheet here if anyone wants to look at the tight end position at C, but I don't necessarily really see that as a weakness. I'll be really interested to see how you do against some of the elite competition. So against the likes of the Saints, the Panthers, the likes of, just in terms of our conference, teams like that, and the Giants really, and see how you come out against those. So that'll be a real interesting sort of litmus test to see whether you can get past the likes of these guys and the Saints in particular. But yeah, I think, as you said, it's going to be really close. I actually think that on the offensive side of the ball, you're going to be better this year, which is scary considering you were like the third best offense last year. So if you increase that and keep the defense pretty much the same, I think you're going to be closer to that 14 win mark than probably we are. Mainly because I think you understand sort of the game planning and playbooks a little bit more than we do. This is only our sort of second year of building playbooks, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, as you said, it's a very close top end of that NFC North, and we'll see how it plays out. And it'll inevitably come down to the two games against each other.
No, I mean, I agree with your analysis. I'm not really too worried about losing Jennings. I think with Rodgers still in the ball, I think my passing offense will be fine, especially with Matt Light now holding down the left tackle spot and adding Holmes. But yeah, I think if there was a question mark, it's kind of see how my defense responds with losing Woodson. I think my defense will be good. It's just, will it be top 5? That's a question.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so the other end of the NFC North, you've got the Chicago Bears and the Vikings pretty much in the same places as they were last year.
Yeah, both teams seem to have a fairly quiet offseason as far as roster movement. Vikings lost free safety Bird and Percy Harvin, and a good tackle, so they might even say from a roster standpoint they might have gone down a little bit. Chicago had a pretty quiet offseason. So it's hard to forecast too much of a change with either of those teams based on offseason.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Chicago it was a little bit of treading water. They lost a couple of big guys, and I think they managed to recover them with a different type of players. And then when you look at the Vikings, they lost a couple of good players, but they managed to acquire a couple of decent ones via the draft and free agency. So I can understand why you've got them down as sort of pretty much treading water, because I don't think they've necessarily upgraded any area. Just tried to keep the current quality of personnel going, really. Okay, so if we move on to the NFC East, so this division's completely different in the sense that it's all pretty close, apart from the Redskins, who are in a bit of a rebuild phase. But I've had a really good offseason, actually. So what's your assessment of the NFC East?
I really don't have one. It was by far the hardest division to really give it much of analysis on. I think really any of those top 3 teams you could flip around, give them 9 wins, give them 5 wins. There's no telling what could happen with this division. I think you can make a case for all 3 teams though to come out on top. I don't love any of the rosters. They all kind of have their flaws, but the Giants ranked. They had the 4th in points scored last year, so I think they have the most firepower and offense to potentially take this division.
Yeah, that was certainly last season. That was the thing that brought the Giants to the top, was just that offense. They were just incredibly good at running the ball, from what I remember. Sorry, not running the ball, passing the ball, from what I remember. And that was their saving grace, really. That was what got them wins out of the bag, really. I think the Eagles struggled a little bit, if I remember, mainly because they didn't quite necessarily have the right strategy, it seemed, for their roster at times. And then the Cowboys, obviously, the thing that hindered the Cowboys last year was just the inactivity, really. The GM was away for a little while, which brought the 6-10 record. I think they, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they started pretty well when the GM was there, and then they just fell away. So we'll see how that pans out. For me, I probably have this order slightly differently. I probably have Cowboys, Giants, Eagles, Redskins, if I'm honest. I just think the Cowboys have, personnel-wise, have had a big improvement this year. And I think if the GM is active, that team could comfortably win 8 to 10 games, I think. I think the Giants will probably be 8-8, Eagles 7-9, and then the Redskins are 3-13. So, I mean, I guess to finish off this division, what's your view on the Redskins then? So they're still obviously down the bottom this year. They've had a really good draft there. They obviously picked up Bobby Wagner and Terrell Pryor in the draft, who look like amazing pickups. Is it a case of just not quite enough talent yet?
Yeah, I mean, I love their draft. I think Pryor's going to be good. I think Bobby Wagner, he was obviously, I was nowhere near high enough to pick him, but I loved Wagner going into the draft. So I think they're headed in the right direction. Long term outlook, I think it's very positive. It's just when you look at the roster this year, I mean, if you look at their position grades, they don't have any wide receivers. Their offensive line is one of the worst in the league. Similar with the defensive line. So I think long term, if they can plug up those holes, they'll be headed in the right direction. I think it's just not this year.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So if we move on to the AFC conference, and we'll start obviously with the AFC North, you've got again this is probably one of the most competitive divisions from position 1 to position 4. Starting with the Ravens, Browns, Steelers, and then the Bengals.
Yeah, roster wise, I think the Ravens have one of the best rosters in the league, top 5. So I don't see. I think it's going to be. I have a lot of confidence in the Browns being good, even though they don't on paper they don't have one of the best rosters, but I think they'll be good. But I think it's going to be really really tough for the Browns to top the Ravens. It seems like the Ravens are just getting better and better too.
Yeah, and the Ravens GM Dennis is working out how to use a playbook. So it's getting a little bit more competitive in that division, certainly, just from an ability. He will have the talent and hopefully have the strategy this year. Interesting that you've pegged the Steelers winning 3 additional games, going from what would have been 5-11 to 8-8. What made you think that the Steelers have made that big jump up this season to get back up into the top of that AFC North?
It'll be interesting. I think if you look at their actual rankings last year, they weren't near as bad as their record. I mean, they were pretty close. If you look at points scored and points against, they were pretty close to league average. So they kind of tailed away at the end of the year. I think they kind of melded in a little bit But if you look at their first 8 games last year, I think they were 1-7 or something, pretty ridiculous. But they lost a lot of close games. So I think from a roster standpoint, I think they're probably a little better. I think maybe if they get a little more luck on their side this year, they might be more competitive than 5-11. So that's kind of the way I was looking at it.
Yeah. So that makes sense. So you're sort of seeing the averages kind of play out a little bit better for the Steelers this year. So some of those close games, they'll get over the line and win them this year.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll see if it plays out. But that was my thinking on the improvement there. It wasn't really roster based necessarily, but
I can understand that. And then we'll sort of finish off with the Bengals, who are down the bottom again. Still trying to, I guess, improve that roster.
Yeah, they had a pretty solid defense last year, but they had one of the worst offenses and didn't really do too much in the offseason to give me a lot of hope. Plus, that division's just so tough. So
yeah, I agree. Going to be tough for them to pull themselves out this year, but signs of improvement certainly. If we move on to the AFC West, tell us about your breakdown for this one.
Yeah, obviously there's no secret that the Broncos should be favorites again. They have one of the fastest defenses in the league, fastest secondaries by far. So I think looking at it right now, they were first in points against last year. I know they lost Dawkins, but I don't think that's going to be enough to derail this defense. On paper, they don't have one of the best offenses from a roster standpoint, but that doesn't really seem to matter last year either. So it's 12-4 actually is probably pretty low for them. I think they might exceed that. I was trying to be a little more conservative in the estimates for some of the teams, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer to 14 or 15.
Yeah, and then I guess the Broncos, just to list off what you've got here. So obviously they lost Dawkins, but let me just tell you the players they've added. So they've added Mike Wallace, one of the best wide receivers. Cameron Jordan, probably one of the best edge players and players in the draft. Darryl Sharper, who is a pretty solid linebacker. and then Charles Woodson, who probably is one of the league's best cornerbacks. So they
Yeah,
haven't certainly lost anything, in my opinion. And then, if anything, they've added like 3 or 4 really good talents to what was already a really good team.
no, good point. I didn't get to that, but yeah, I think they're. If I kind of, I mean, I have to put this summer together a little faster than I want to, but yeah, I think if I was looking at this again, I might be a little bit low on the 12 wins. So it'll be interesting. I think them and I'm really all. I mean, them, the Titans, Patriots, and the Ravens all could come out of the AFC. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I wasn't near as high when you get to the Chiefs. Though I was a little bit lower on them. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, so tell us about the Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, they had a very quiet offseason. I mean, really almost no roster movement. So I guess from just a roster standpoint, I didn't think they were a 10-win team last year. I might have been 6 wins might not be realistic or might not be the best guess for them. I mean, they do have a good defense, so maybe I was a little hard on them, but I think I was looking more than anything that their running back, their quarterback is probably one of the worst backfields in the league. So I think their offense probably won't rank too well this year, but we'll see if their defense can carry them to 10 wins again.
Yeah, certainly was the story last season, and probably will be the story this season. Is the defense of that team will drive them forward. Not many roster changes. Another season of Pat Devlin developing, the legend that he is now. We'll see how he goes, and then we move on to sort of the bottom 2 teams who have been the bottom 2 teams since the start of the CSFL. Really, the LA Chargers and the Oakland Raiders. Looks like you got the Chargers sort of staying pat, and then the Raiders winning one additional game.
Yeah, I mean, I think the GM I think they're headed in the right direction. I don't think they're in a pretty bad, rough spot to start with. So it might take a couple of years to pull them out, but I think they'll get there. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look at the reports you provided for both of them, they've both teams have lost some considerable talent. Is probably fair to say. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they play out, because you've got the Chargers, who the GM has had about half a season, I think, in charge now. Made some quite big pickups in the draft, and we'll see how that plays out. And then the Raiders, obviously, we know were heavily active in free agency because they just don't have any draft picks, unfortunately. But they did again lose some big personnel this offseason, notably Raji and Wimbley, were the 2 big ones. Okay, so if we move on to the AFC South, interesting this one for me, just from the point of view that you've got obviously the Titans at the top, and then you've got the Colts and the Jags neck and neck in that sort of second position.
Yeah, this is one of the divisions where really a lot. I mean, you can say this about a lot of the teams in the AFC, where I probably wanted to give some of these teams more wins, but that would throw everything out of balance. So unfortunately, I had to give someone some losses. I think it's hard to really tell what's going to happen in this division. I like the Texans. I like where they're going, but there's just so many tough teams in this conference. I don't see them doing a whole lot better than 7 wins. But given where they were last year, it's still going to be an achievement. But Titans, yeah, I mean, I think they're still the best team in this division by a decent margin. Colts and Jags are interesting. Jags haven't really proven that they can have a good offense so far. So they added sitting at guard. So we'll see if that helps out. But I wasn't too big on their offense. And then I think looking at Indianapolis, I think their defense may have been. Oh, their defense wasn't too bad last year. They're kind of middle of the board across in both offense and defense last year. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting division. If you take all of the teams in here, so I mean, for me, the Titans, you've got the Titans, proven winner, knows what they're doing, got a roster that's been pretty stationary for most of the time. They've managed to add, I believe it was Reggie Wayne this off season, which is a big acquisition. They kind of need that elite wide receiver.
Yeah, I think they have three big wide receivers.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting
to see what they do with that.
Yeah, I mean, in like a full wide receiver set, considering they've lost Best as well, their primary running back last season. Adding Reggie in, it's going to be interesting if they just run a lot of four wide receiver sets or just 3 wide receiver sets and just pretty much play off of that. That's going to be fascinating. But you've got a GM there who knows what he's doing. You've got the Colts, who, for those who don't know, the Colts GM Jed is in the college league that we run, and his offense is always just incredible in that, and he always has a really, really strong program in there. Been a difficult turning point with the Colts since he's taken over, I think, with personnel and things. But yeah, as you said, the offense is good. The defense wasn't as bad as I thought it would be last year. So maybe there's some natural progression there this season.
Yeah, the Colts are interesting. I mean, they really, if you look at the numbers, they really struggled rushing the ball and really struggled stopping the run. So if they can just get those two things even close to 5, in the middle, then I think they could definitely see some improvement. But easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you talked about the Jags. Jags again, another proven, experienced GM. Offense has always been the challenge for them, but as you said, they've added Sitton this year, so maybe their rushing ability has always been elite. It's like been the top 2 or 3 every single season, I think, since the GM's been there. It's the passing that's been terrible, and I don't know whether they've managed to address that yet.
Yeah, I think when I was originally doing this, I think I had them at 11 wins, but in the efforts to get everyone to have the same wins and losses for the league, I think I dropped them down a couple. But I think they're pretty good though. I think they could definitely. I don't know if I don't have faith of them beating the Titans, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do get a wild card. I think they did last year, so.
Yeah, I think so. I think I agree with you. And then, the final one, obviously, the Houston Texans in the AFC South is an interesting one because you've got, they're making positive strides really quickly this offseason, in my opinion. They lost a couple of good players in Sitton, managed to acquire Faneka, managed to get Andrew Luck. And now going from a team that probably won 5 games last year to probably winning 7 this year, and now being just a couple of games from that pushing for the top. What was your assessment on the Texans this year?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it on the mark with there. I mean, they added Luck and McCoy at running back, and then Faneca at guard. So, and they were already, pretty close to average offense last year. I really think they'll be a top half offense this year. Their defense is the one that I think probably needs another offseason of work to get over to really be competitive for a playoff run, but I think they'll get there.
Yeah, a very fair assessment, I think, of the Texans. And then we've got our final division, which is the AFC East. Give us your breakdown for this one, because you've got the Dolphins making leaps and strides, Jets falling off, and the Patriots still on top.
Yeah, it was interesting when I did this one because when I kind of ran the numbers and looked at the Dolphins roster, actually, just from a on the paper standpoint, I really like their roster. Obviously, having a good roster on paper is only part of the obstacle. You have to take it out on the field and get results with it. So we'll see if they can actually take advantage of it. But I think they have the roster on paper to be one of the better teams in this division. Surprisingly, I had them over the Jets, which even surprised me because I was pretty high on the Jets going into this. So we'll see what happens here.
Yeah, I mean, just stick with the Dolphins for a second. They had they acquired some really good players in free agency. They obviously had a lot of cap room because they lost some big players in Cushing, Langford, and Marshall. But they've managed to acquire Wembley, Smith, Hainsworth, and Hawk, all good additions. They're probably a lot deeper than they've ever been, which is going to be a big advantage for them because it means they don't necessarily have any holes on offense or defense now going into this. So I can certainly see why you've got them for such a considerable jump of 4 wins this year. And you mentioned obviously the Jets. Jets have pretty much stayed status quo. It's fair to say they lost Mangold and Holmes, but they managed to acquire Larry Johnson and Winslow Jr. 2 different types of positional players that they probably needed. So probably going to be similar if you've got 2 wins difference, 1 win difference, probably in my opinion. So yeah, it's going to be close in that middle pack. And then obviously the Patriots at 11-5. I think the big question that'd be interested to ask you with them is, are they now considered to be challenging some of the elite teams like the Titans and Broncos again? Or are they still going to be a team that just comfortably wins their division and falls away quite quickly?
Yeah, that's a question mark. I kind of skipped over the Patriots when I was talking about the Jets and the Dolphins, but I think they're right up there with just about any team in this league. So I think it's just I don't know. I really couldn't tell you what their playoff results are going to be, but I think I feel pretty comfortable they're going to win this division, even with Dolphins and Jets being pretty good competition.
Yeah. Yeah, some big losses for them this offseason. They managed to retain a couple, but they obviously managed to get Darius in the draft, which was huge. So see how that one plays out. And then our final team to wrap up the division and conference looks, the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, they had some pretty big acquisitions, and Beeson and Bird at free safety. And they got a good running back, but still looking at the roster, I think they're still a little bit limited with cap space in certain areas to address.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question, isn't it? Is the cap space and the depth, because I think, let me double check 1 second, because I think they've probably got one of the least amount of players on the team. So they've got the least amount of players on the roster, which is only 32. So a couple of injuries and that team could fall away quite quickly.
Yeah, they have some star power. They have some top end talent, but yeah, I think the depth might get them in the end.
Yeah, I mean, if the team stays healthy and they have no injuries, that star power could possibly get them closer to 6 wins than 4. I guess the injuries are the question mark.
I agree.
Cool. Okay, so we've just wrapped up the divisions and by each conference. So let's just finish with your predictions down the bottom, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts of how you work your way through to get to the NFC champ, the AFC champ, and into the Super Bowl winner. How you go through that process once you've got your teams with the records here, where you feel their projections are going to be.
There's really not much of a science to that part of it. The main reason being, I think there's so many teams at the top that are so close. It's going to be a coin toss. I mean, just last year we saw the Cardinals make a run, and nobody thought that was going to happen when the playoffs started. So trying to act like I can predict what can happen in the playoffs this early is not even possible. So I kind of went with my gut more than anything. There's no real rhyme or reason why I picked the teams. But I mean, I'll start with the winner. I mean, I picked you guys, Lions, to win it all. But I think just from a starter position, I thought you had probably the best roster as far as, or I would say not best, but probably as good as anyone. And then when you add in the depth and the fact that you really don't have any holes, I thought you probably had the best roster. We'll see if, obviously the teams like the Broncos, the Saints with experienced GMs are always going to be up there. So I think those are going to be the teams to knock off. But from a preview standpoint, looking at talent and everything, I really like, where you guys are at. Same with the Ravens. It's just kind of a gut feel. I think they're in a really good spot to make a run this season. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, interesting prediction. We'll see how it certainly plays out. I guess one of the great things you talked about the Cardinals. One of the great things about the engine, the game engine, is it's not just about talent and just having the best possible players at every position, but also there is the actual game planning side and the strategy side. And we've seen it with the Cardinals. You can beat teams with more talent by game planning properly. So who knows what will happen? But it's interesting to get your predictions, and this really is a fantastic article, a season preview primer, really is what I would call it. Really, really appreciate the effort and the work. Thank you so much for going through it with us. And yeah, best of luck for the season. I do feel, though, you've put the Lions in there because you don't want to put the Packers in there. That's why I feel from that.
No, you're not wrong. I can't predict myself to win the Super Bowl, so there's no way I'd put myself there. I think I think we have a good roster. I think we'll be there right at the end. But first, we haven't even won a playoff game yet, so we'll try to do that first before we start predicting Super Bowls.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll get closer this year if the seeding is correct and proper for you. I'm sure you'll be perfectly fine. But yeah, no, thank you very much, Zach, for going through this. Any GM who's watching, go and read this because it's a real fascinating insight, and what Zach has done here is so much better than what's actually in the game in terms of just a couple of lines about each team, projections. Really fantastic work, Zach.
No, I appreciate the compliments, and ready to get started on another year.
Absolutely. Not long now. Not long now. This only a few more days and then we'll be into the regular season and we'll see how these projections live up.
Yeah, man, I need to do a follow up at the end of the year this time and see how close I was.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get you back on if you want to see how it's gone, good or bad.
Yeah, sounds good.